You're redundant. That's how it started. Not a conversation, not a heads up, not even a goddamn sentence with a subject and verb. Just you're redundant, like someone reading a broken printer error aloud. Travis, the new VP with an ego the size of a tax audit and the personality of a wet sneeze, stood at the front of the all hands like he was announcing the second coming. He had this smug glint in his eye, the kind you only see on guys who think the 401k is a conspiracy and keep cologne in their desk drawer. Norwell Dynamics needs to modernize, he said, clicking through a PowerPoint where every slide was just the word agile in different fonts. We're cutting friction, streamlining, letting go of legacy processes and, frankly, legacy people. That last part? He made eye contact with me when he said it, and not the kind you remember fondly, the kind that makes you check if your LinkedIn is up to date. 2 days later, I was called into HR. No warning, no subject line in the calendar invite. Just join us in 4B. That's where we keep the crying chairs. Travis didn't even sit down. He leaned in the doorway like this was some kind of episode of Succession. Jessica, he said, his voice syrupy and smug, your role no longer aligns with the company's future goals. We're grateful for your years of service, but compliance is being restructured. I looked at the HR rep. She looked at the floor. You're letting me go, I said flatly. He smiled. You're being released to new opportunities. No severance conversation? Transition period? Travis glanced at his smartwatch, then muttered something about sunsetting redundancies. I've seen used car salesmen with more grace. I didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't throw a stapler like Janet did in finance when she got canned in 19. I just stood up, smoothed my blouse, and said noted. Then I walked out, quiet as a spreadsheet error. As I closed the door behind me, I glanced at my compliance binder, green tab, locked drawer, top shelf. 8 years of federal forms, audit trails, and boring, beautiful bureaucracy. Oh, and hey, since you're already here, if this little tale of corporate buffoonery is scratching that itch in your brain where rage meets justice, hit that subscribe button and throw a like our way. 90% of y'all are listening like ghosts without clicking. It seriously helps the crew keep digging up these juicy office train wrecks. Appreciate you. Anyway, back to the part where I walked to my car like a ghost, holding a rolling case full of binders, badge clinking in my pocket like a dead man's keys. No goodbye emails, no cupcakes, just the soft hum of a compliance system about to go very, very non-compliant. I got home that night, microwaved some lasagna, and opened my personal inbox. There it was, a little confirmation email from the federal grant portal. Form GR61 submitted. Timestamp, April 9th, 7:42 a.m. That form, that was the only reason Norwell still had access to their $12.7 million research grant. And guess whose signature it required to stay valid? Mine. And guess what else? It hadn't taken effect yet, not officially. Not until the following Tuesday at 9:01 a.m., which meant I still had a button I could push. One that Travis didn't know existed. One that could turn his shiny PowerPoint world into a pile of burnt toast and unpaid invoices. But for now, I sipped my wine and watched Wheel of Fortune like any other Tuesday night, because revenge, my friend, is a process, just like compliance. And unlike Travis, I actually knew how to follow one. The next morning, I returned my badge like it was radioactive, slid it across the HR desk without a word. No handshake, no exit interview, just the soft clink as it hit the acrylic countertop, and the barely audible squeak of my rolling case full of binders trailing behind me like the ghost of Christmas audits past. I didn't send a goodbye email. I didn't owe anyone a LinkedIn blurb or a wishing you all the best, corporate haiku. My inbox was still open on my laptop when I powered it down, an unsent draft blinking in the corner like a dog waiting at the door. It stayed there, unfinished, unbothered. I had better things to do. On my way out, I made one final stop, compliance cabinet, 4th floor, right next to the copy machine that jams every third Tuesday like clockwork. I unlocked drawer #3, pulled the green-tabbed binder labeled Grant Eligibility Active, and slid it into my rolling case between federal audit responses and Q1 lab certifications. There's something deeply satisfying about organized paper, like a soft-spoken middle finger to chaos. In the hallway, someone said my name quietly like it tasted weird in their mouth. I didn't turn around. By 9:35 a.m., I was gone. 10 minutes later, the Slack channels started buzzing. At Compliance Goblins, who's handling the GR61 station this year? At Ops Nerd, thought Jess submitted it already? At Compliance Goblins, she did, but the portal shows it as pending. Needs reconfirmation. Need a new sign-off. At HR Squad, Travis is assigning that out. Stand by. Let me pause and paint a picture for you here. The GR61 is not your average click and forget web form. It's not a Google Doc you can slap a DocuSign on and hope for the best. It's a federally controlled attestation with clearance requirements, agency backstops, and a mandatory registration as a compliance officer on file. And that clearance takes months. Background checks, fingerprints, training modules with quizzes that make DMV tests look like Jeopardy for toddlers. But Travis, oh Travis, he assigned the task to Brian. Brian, who once asked if compliance was like legal's annoying cousin. Brian, who thought federal clearance was just a VPN login. Brian, who now had my former job's most sensitive task dropped on his lap like a live grenade filled with Latin acronyms and funding clawback clauses. 10:14 a.m., I saw the Slack screenshot get forwarded to me by Rachel from payroll, my only real friend in that place. It was captioned simply, "This gonna be fun." Before my credentials were revoked at noon, I logged in one last time and forwarded myself a PDF, nothing dramatic. Just a timestamped copy of the active GR61 form, signed, submitted, and marked pending activation. That little detail, that form's legal activation window. That's what they'd all forget, because it wasn't just about submission, it was about employment status. A technicality. A line buried in the fine print like a fuse in drywall. Once that email landed in my personal inbox, I logged out. Permanently. Somewhere in that shiny new operations war room Travis set up with beanbags and synergy walls, I imagined there was a whiteboard with my name under phase out. Cute. I didn't need a phase. I had a countdown. That night, Brian messaged Rachel asking where the compliance keys were. She told him, "Jessica always said it's not about keys, it's about knowing which door doesn't lock." He didn't get it, but I did. And that door, it was about to swing wide open, real soon. 3 days after my exit, while I was elbow deep in a second-hand bookshelf I'd been meaning to assemble since the Obama administration, my phone buzzed with a notification from my personal email. Subject line, duplicate submission notification GR61 from Northeast Regional Compliance Liaison, Federal Grants Division. I sat down on the floor next to a half-built cube of particle board and opened the message. We received a secondary GR61 attestation for Norwell Dynamics, conflicting with the active signature on file. Please advise which party currently holds official compliance authority. Well, someone tried to Frankenstein the form back to life. That someone, of course, was Brian. According to Rachel, bless her for still having feet in both worlds and zero filter, he tried to resubmit the form using his company email, a janky scan signature, and a note that said, "Updated submission per team restructuring. Original signer has departed." The federal portal flagged it immediately. You don't just edit a federal document like it's a grocery list. There's a system, a chain of clearance, and more importantly, a damn registration ID, which Brian didn't have, because Brian wasn't registered. Because Brian, until 3 days ago, thought federal grants were something you apply for on TurboTax. Rachel sent me another screenshot from their compliance Slack at Brian Codes. "Hey, so who do I contact at the feds to be the new form guy?" No one responded for 6 hours. Then, at 4:16 p.m., granting agency emailed again, this time to Norwell's compliance inbox directly. "Please clarify the conflicting submissions. We require written confirmation of who currently holds the designated compliance role. The individual on file is still Jessica P. Evans." Brian panicked. He did what every underqualified, overconfident middle manager does in a crisis. He CC'd his boss and hoped someone else would make it go away. So now Travis was looped in. The man who had built his entire ego pyramid on moving fast was now staring down a formal inquiry from the federal agency holding the purse strings to Norwell's $12.7 million grant. How did he respond? With a one-liner that deserves to be embroidered on a pillow and chucked at his face. "We're restructuring. She was redundant. We'll sign it again." That was it. No explanation. No humility. Just 6 words that could tank a fiscal year. The compliance officer's reply was polite. Chillingly so. "Please be advised that federal designation cannot be reassigned without proper clearance and reauthorization. Any attempts to override or duplicate official forms may be flagged for review." In Fed speak, that's the equivalent of a loaded shotgun being cocked behind a velvet curtain. Meanwhile, Rachel told me the lab team was starting to murmur. No new supply orders were coming through. Project leads had been told to pause expenditures until the new compliance signature clears, but no one knew who that signature belonged to. And me? I was in my kitchen peeling a clementine, listening to Travis's big modernization webinar on speakerphone. Rachel had forwarded me the link with the subject line, "You'll love this circus." Halfway through the presentation, Travis casually mentioned streamlining compliance processes, and someone in the chat box asked, "Is Jessica still involved?" He ignored the question, but others didn't. The silence in that room, digital or not, was starting to weigh heavy. You see, bureaucracy isn't sexy. It's not shiny. It doesn't clap back on Slack or trend on LinkedIn. But when it's gone, when the one person who knew where all the bodies were buried and where the shovels were kept vanishes, you don't notice right away. But soon, everything starts to smell like smoke. The clock above the reference desk at East Ridge Public Library ticked louder than it had any right to. I sat at terminal #7, wedged between a kid watching Minecraft videos on mute and an elderly woman doing a Bible crossword in Comic Sans. The fluorescent light above me buzzed like it had opinions. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, waiting. 8:58 a.m. My breath was steady. My heart wasn't. I'd already cleared the cache, triple-checked the VPN, and logged in with my federally issued compliance credentials one last time. I wasn't supposed to still have access, technically, But the system doesn't care about should and shouldn't. It cares about timestamps, and mine hadn't expired. Yet, the GR61 attestation was sitting in my queue like a loaded shell. Status, submitted, not active, not locked. It was pending, just like my termination, which HR had so thoughtfully scheduled to become legally effective at 9:01 a.m. sharp on Tuesday morning. I had 2 minutes. The rescind attestation button isn't flashy. There's no warning pop-up, no are you sure, just a plain gray box. One click and done. At 8:59:17 I clicked it, the screen flashed. Submission revoked timestamp. 08:59:17 April 16 I leaned back in the chair. No smile, no fist pump. Just a tiny, sharp inhale through my nose. Like slipping a key into a lock and hearing that satisfying click. 1 minute and 43 seconds later, 9:01 a.m., my employment at Norwell Dynamics officially ended. I received the automated severance confirmation in my personal inbox, which meant the GR61, my attestation, the very document that gave Norwell its eligibility to receive and retain over $12 million in active federal grant funding, was now legally invalid, voided, poisoned from the inside out by a system designed to be boring, right up until the moment it becomes a bomb. I shut the terminal down, nodded politely to the librarian at the desk, and walked out into the morning sun like I'd just returned a book. Across town, somewhere in the server room of the Northeast Regional Compliance Office, an alert lit up in red. GR61 rescinded by primary officer. Project Norwell Dynamics status flagged. It didn't make a sound, not really. But I like to imagine it hummed. A low, persistent hum, like the one just before the lights go out. At Norwell, they were probably just starting their Tuesday stand-up meeting. Travis, full of swagger, probably tossing around words like momentum and ownership in front of a whiteboard no one asked for. Maybe Brian was trying to upload another form. Maybe Legal was sipping their coffee, blissfully unaware that in exactly 6 hours, someone in DC would be calling their main line. Maybe anyone, would finally think to ask, "Where's Jessica?" But by then, I'd be halfway through my second latte, sitting in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the Capitol, phone on silent, inbox filling with the kind of emails that start with, "We were wondering if you'd be open to a short-term engagement," because this wasn't vengeance. It wasn't petty, it was compliance. Cold, slow, and permanent. Just like it was designed to be, it started with an email, always does. Subject, immediate attention required temporary suspension notification from Federal Grants Division 2. Grants at Norwell Dynamics GOM. The message was short, clinical, and utterly radioactive. Due to a revoked GR61 attestation and absence of a federally registered compliance officer, Norwell Dynamics' eligibility to receive and utilize federal funds is temporarily suspended, effective immediately. Please refrain from accessing or distributing allocated grant monies until requalification is approved. That little paragraph hit Norwell's server at exactly 11:27 a.m. By 11:30, Rachel was texting me screenshots from her smartwatch under the conference room table. "You're trending. Travis says it's just paperwork. Board looks like they just swallowed a stapler." Travis, bless his bootleg MBA soul, stood in front of the board and waved it all off like it was a misplaced lunch order. "We're restructuring," he repeated. "The original signer was let go during optimization. We'll have Brian re-sign and re-upload by close of business. No big deal, no big deal." The room didn't buy it. You could smell the fear through the phone. According to Rachel, one of the older board members actually asked, "What's a GR61?" And Travis gave him a TED Talk-adjacent answer about compliance modernization that made 3 people visibly flinch. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my balcony with my laptop, hair still wet from the shower, when a polite little chime echoed from my inbox. Subject, Consulting Inquiry Federal Grant Compliance. Miss Evans, given your extensive familiarity with the GR61 process and your prior role at Norwell Dynamics, we were wondering if you might be open to a temporary consulting engagement to assist with updated training and review protocols for grantee organizations. Please let us know if you're available for a short call this week. Best regards, Vanessa Green, Northeast Regional Liaison, Federal Grants Division. I sat there blinking at it, rereading the line, extensive familiarity. 8 years I'd sat in that beige cubicle, color-coding binders and citing subclauses no one cared about. 8 years of travestipes walking past me like I was part of the furniture. 8 years of being introduced as our detail-oriented compliance gal. Now I was suddenly the one they wanted on the phone. And Norwell was stuck. Rachel told me the lab director had to halt a $1.2 million procurement order that morning because the vendor portal flagged their federal ID as non-compliant. A research team got pulled off their project mid-trial because they couldn't legally run funded experiments without an active grant. Someone even had to cancel the damn team lunch because the card they used was tied to the grant budget. And Travis spent the day yelling into a speakerphone in Legal's glass office, trying to explain to a federal representative why his junior analyst submitted a form that, legally, he wasn't even allowed to view without clearance. Still, I wasn't gloating. Not yet. There was no victory lap, no Schadenfreude confetti. Just a deep, bone-level satisfaction, like watching someone who mocked seatbelts get gently ejected through a sunroof at 5 miles per hour. What Travis didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this wasn't the bottom. This was the first crack in the dam, the kind that looks harmless until your feet get wet, and the real flood was scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. The spiral didn't scream at first, it hissed. By Wednesday morning, Norwell's research lab was effectively paralyzed. The quarterly test cycle was paused mid-run. Beakers left bubbling. Incubators mid-process. 2 rats reportedly died because the new tech couldn't run their scheduled gene treatments without the compliance funding tracking ID. Real shame. Those rats had better benefits than I did. At 8:11 a.m., a frozen shipment of biotech materials, delicate, temperamental, and worth over $1 million, was held at customs in Newark. The freight company flagged Norwell's clearance credentials as suspended pending review, and their internal risk algorithm kicked in like a caffeine-fueled chihuahua. No release, no override, just pallets of perishable bio-luxury rotting under UV tarps while some poor intern tried to figure out if dry ice had a feelings setting. Rachel texted me a picture of the Slack thread. At Procurement God, who has override authority for FDA-linked grant shipments? At Ops Travis, this is clearly Brian's screw-up. He submitted a duplicate. At Brian Codes, this was the last message he ever sent. This is above my pay grade. I never got training. I'm out. Brian quit, just like that. Nuked his Slack profile, forwarded his inbox to HR, and ghosted the building like a particularly pale millennial Batman. Word was he left his badge on the office kombucha tap. Meanwhile, legal finally woke up, probably around the time someone from the agency called to inform them that Norwell wasn't just missing a compliance officer. They legally couldn't submit a new GR61 at a station for at least 90 days. Clearance process, the agency said. Federal review, background check. Recertification. Could be longer if an investigation is launched. That last part, investigation. That's the word that finally punctured Travis's inflated self-confidence like a paper straw in hot coffee. According to Rachel, he called an emergency alignment huddle at 10:07 a.m. and locked legal, ops, and finance into the fishbowl conference room with a stack of half-printed grant documents, a rapidly melting iced latte, and a whiteboard that read, "Crisis equals opportunity by 10:13 a.m." Someone had crossed it out and written, "No, it's just a crisis." From my end, I watched the chaos unfold like it was pay-per-view. The grant suspension made it onto a niche science funding blog I followed, buried halfway through a dry paragraph on compliance shakeups. Still, there it was. Norwell Dynamics, recipient of a $12.7 million federal biotech research grant, has temporarily suspended operations following a revoked compliance filing and subsequent eligibility freeze. Sources indicate internal recertification issues. I forwarded it to my sister with the subject, "Guess who's famous?" She replied with a gif of a woman eating popcorn in a ball gown. I wasn't gloating, not exactly. But let's be real. When you've been called redundant, erased without ceremony, and replaced by a guy who once asked what an EIN was, we're in the right to enjoy the smell of bureaucratic napalm. Back at Norwell, the panic reached oxygen deprivation levels. The operations team tried to quietly reverse course, claiming it was all a temporary administrative delay. But vendors weren't answering their emails. The grant payment scheduled for Friday was suddenly under review. And the lab's lead scientist, a woman who once called my binder labeling OCD but useful, was overheard saying, "Wait, you fired her? And Travis?" The man was pacing so hard his Apple Watch thought he was running a marathon. Legal had stopped replying to his messages in writing. HR was requesting verbal-only comms. Rachel said he tried to schedule a meeting with someone from the federal agency, only to be told, "We cannot speak to unregistered individuals about active grant investigations." He shouted, "I'm the vice president," they said, not of compliance. At 5:47 p.m., while Norwell burned its own house down in slow motion, I poured a glass of red wine and clicked accept on a calendar invite from Vanessa Green. Subject, consulting intake call tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Underneath, she'd written, "Appreciate your time. We understand your insight may be critical to preventing further disruption." Damn right it is. The boardroom smelled like panic and old printer toner. It was Thursday morning, 8:00 a.m. sharp, and every executive with a title that included the word chief had been summoned to Norwell's 17th floor conference suite, an overlit aquarium of leather chairs and glass walls, where strategy used to be whispered over artisanal muffins and quarterly graphs. Today, there were no muffins, just silence and Travis. He sat at the end of the table, jaw locked, palms flat on the mahogany like he was bracing for a mild earthquake. His tie was a shade too tight, his eyes a little too wide. You could tell he hadn't slept, not just from the purple half-moons under his eyes, but from the way he flinched every time someone shifted in their seat. The chairman entered 5 minutes late, eyes scanning the room like he was counting heads at a funeral. He didn't speak, he just nodded to the door. That's when the compliance auditor walked in. No fanfare, no clearance badge, just a manila folder tucked under one arm and the look of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. His suit was too big, his shoes looked orthopedic, and his expression was the dead-eyed neutrality of someone whose entire job revolves around not caring how badly you're about to screw yourself. He didn't sit. He didn't even offer a greeting. He just walked to the table, placed the folder dead center, opened it with one hand, and slid a single sheet of paper forward like a blackjack dealer laying down an ace of spades. Form GR61, he said flatly. Signed by Jessica P. Evans on April 9th at 7:42 a.m. Travis leaned forward, trying to speak. The auditor raised a finger and continued, unbothered. This form was rescinded by the original compliance officer on April 16th at 8:59 a.m. He pulled out a second page and laid it on top. Severance confirmation timestamp. April 16th, 9:01 a.m. Legally effective. He paused, scanning the table. This means your eligibility to receive or utilize federal grant funds was revoked immediately at the moment of her termination. Any activities involving those funds since that moment are subject to audit. Potential reclassification, misuse or misappropriation of federal resources. Depending on intent, that could escalate. The air in the room changed, thicker, heavier. People weren't breathing, they were calculating. The CFO's pen slid slowly off the edge of his notepad. No one picked it up. The chairman cleared his throat. We were under the impression that the form had already been accepted. The auditor didn't flinch. Submission is not activation. Activation requires the continued employment of the designated officer at the time of effective date. Jessica Evans was removed from her position 2 minutes after rescission. But Travis finally blurted, voice cracking like a teenager caught shoplifting. But we reassigned the role. We submitted a new one, Brian, the auditor blinked. Mr. Connors was not a registered compliance officer. His submission was automatically rejected. He also resigned yesterday, yes? Someone at the far end of the table muttered, Jesus Christ. The chairman turned toward HR. Was anyone else in the pipeline? Anyone credentialed? HR looked like she might throw up. We were exploring options, but clearance takes 90 days minimum. The auditor snapped the folder closed and tucked it under his arm. Until such time, your federal grant remains frozen. Use of funds may constitute fraud under Title 18. My office recommends immediate suspension of all activity until legal review is complete. A formal investigation has been opened. And just like that, he turned and walked out. No goodbyes, no explanations, just the dull clack of orthopedic heels against tile and the slow collapse of a room full of overpaid optimists. Travis was sweating through his shirt. You could see it, small circles blooming under his arms like guilt stains. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Eyes darted to him. From the chairman, the CFO, legal, operations, everyone. No one said it out loud, but the question was hanging in the air like smoke off a power surge. Who fired her? And more importantly, what the hell have you done? The silence after the auditor left was the kind that doesn't invite conversation, it crushes it. A room full of alphas suddenly breathing like they'd been buried alive. Legal shuffled papers with the urgency of someone trying to disappear into a folder. HR stared down into her lap like maybe the floor tiles would open and swallow her whole. Even the CFO, normally so smug he'd correct people's grammar and earnings calls, was white-knuckling a stress ball shaped like a globe. The chairman, who hadn't moved since the folder hit the table, reached out and slowly lifted the now infamous GR61 with 2 fingers like it might bite him. This form, he said, each word loud enough to be a gavel, clearly states that the compliance officer of record, the only person authorized to submit and activate this document, is Jessica Evans. Is that correct? Legal cleared his throat. Yes, that was her designation under federal registration. It's non-transferable without recertification. The chairman turned his gaze to HR. She flinched. Who, he said, voice tight and low, fired Jessica Evans? HR's mouth opened, but all that came out was a sound like someone choking on a spoonful of peanut butter. Travis cut in, voice louder than it needed to be. The reorg was a collective decision. The chairman raised one eyebrow. A collective decision? Travis gestured vaguely toward the room. We had discussed streamlining redundancies. Compliance was included in that discussion. It wasn't just me. HR, now sweating through her silk blouse, spoke up, her voice a nervous flutter. Travis submitted the termination paperwork. He filled out the HRIS entry. He signed the severance timestamp, a slow turn of heads in Travis's direction. He licked his lips. That was procedural. I was told it was aligned. With whom? The chairman asked. I assumed legal was looped, that it was understood. Legal looked like someone had just told them the Titanic hit another iceberg. We were never informed of her removal until the Slack questions started 2 days later. Legal replied. We assumed, incorrectly, that a replacement had been certified. Has anyone, the chairman asked carefully, as if trying not to break the remaining thread holding this disaster together, submitted the requalification forms for new compliance officer? HR shook her head. No one on staff has clearance. We checked. He turned to legal. Timeline to register someone new. Legal rubbed his eyes. Best case? 90 days, assuming clean background, approved agency onboarding, and no red flags. And worst case? If the investigation proceeds, 6 months, maybe longer. Someone at the table muttered, we're screwed. The chairman ignored him. Are we officially under investigation? Legal exhaled like he'd been holding it all meeting. There's an open review. Once flagged, any past grant activity in the suspension window is subject to audit. Translation, the CFO said quietly, we could be on the hook for clawbacks. Up to $12.7 million, legal added, like it was just a casual weather report. Travis sat frozen. You could practically hear the click-click-click of all his career options imploding like dominoes falling in a straight line to nowhere. The chairman placed the GR61 face-up on the table, slid it toward Travis, and tapped the line with Jessica's name. Signed her termination, he said. You erased the one person keeping this place above water, without telling legal, without clearance in place, without understanding what the hell this form even did. Travis tried to speak. Nothing came out. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple and splashed onto the paper, right over Jessica's signature. The chairman leaned back, steepled his fingers, and said nothing. He didn't have to. The silence was the loudest verdict in the room. At 11:04 a.m., the screen on the wall blinked to life. A grainy government-issued Zoom call loaded slowly, revealing the tight-lipped face of Vanessa Green, Northeast Regional Liaison for the Federal Grants Division. Her expression was pure administrative death. No makeup, no smile, just a pair of wireframe glasses and the weary patience of someone who's seen the same disaster play out in 7 other boardrooms this year, but never quite this stupidly. This meeting is being recorded, she said. Let's begin. Travis shifted in his chair like the fabric was trying to strangle him. The chairman didn't flinch. We're listening. Vanessa glanced at her notes. Our office has formally opened an investigation into Norwell Dynamics under potential violations of Title 18, subsection 1001, false statements in a matter within federal jurisdiction. The revoked GR61 attestation, submitted under the name of a terminated employee, constitutes a material misrepresentation. HR blanched. Legal scribbled something down that looked like it might have been a prayer. Vanessa continued. Until further notice, do not attempt to resubmit the grant. Do not attempt to edit or upload supporting documentation. Your system access is frozen. Any further activity will be interpreted as interference with an active federal investigation. Travis opened his mouth. The chairman held up a single finger. Silence returned. Vanessa tapped her screen. Our system still lists Jessica P. Evans as the primary compliance contact for Norwell Dynamics. There is no registered replacement, no pending clearance application. Her name is the only one tied to your grant ID. She paused, letting the silence dig its claws in. Should she be willing, Vanessa added, we are prepared to re-engage with Miss Evans through appropriate consulting channels. And with that, the screen went black. Nobody moved. The chairman reached slowly for his phone. Get her on the phone, he said. Travis looked like someone had just offered him a folding chair on the Titanic. His lips moved, but nothing came out. He turned toward legal, then toward HR, then toward the door. But no one followed, no one answered, no one saved him. Jessica's name still echoed in the room like a ghost that had been haunting the walls long before they realized she was gone. Meanwhile, 5 miles away, I was on my balcony in sweatpants and an old conference t-shirt that still smelled faintly like toner and trauma. The sun was sharp, the breeze warm, and the coffee in my mug was fresh enough to steam off the last traces of doubt. My laptop dinged. New email. From Andrew Linton at Norwell Boardcom subject. Consulting engagement priority. Urgent Jessica, if you're open to a short-term contract, the board would like to discuss terms immediately. Timeline is sensitive. Please advise availability. I didn't smile, didn't pump a fist, didn't even blink. I just took a sip of coffee, watched a pigeon crap on the neighbor's Tesla, and let the moment hang there. Quiet, complete, clean. This wasn't revenge, this was procedure. And unlike Travis, I didn't need a team to execute it. Just a working clock, a revoked signature, and the knowledge that sometimes, the quiet ones don't just hold the keys, they are the lock. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old manager spill their coffee in fear.